Welcome to Trump Wire, your trusted source for breaking headlines, global insights, and sharp analysis from around the world. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an update. Good evening, I'm Chris Wallace. Tonight we examine a crisis shaking the foundation of American industry. After Trump's tariffs, Detroit's auto industry faces a seismic shift. The Motor City, once a symbol of American manufacturing, is now in turmoil. 5 major automakers are leaving, their factories falling silent, while Canada steps in to fill the void. We'll investigate the decisions by GM, Ford, Chrysler, Tesla, and Rivian, and the human cost behind these moves. We'll also see how Canada has capitalized, positioning itself as the new hub of North American auto manufacturing. Stay with us as we unpack this stunning development. The first shockwave came from General Motors, Detroit's most iconic resident. GM and Detroit were inseparable for over a century, so their exit felt like a betrayal. Citing skyrocketing costs from tariffs on steel and aluminum, GM declared U.S. production unsustainable. The tariffs, meant to protect American companies, instead drove up costs and disrupted supply chains. Suddenly, every imported part was taxed, erasing profit margins on key models. GM's CEO announced a painful realignment, shifting truck and SUV production from Michigan to Oshawa, Ontario. Canada, seizing the opportunity, offered incentives and a stable, tariff-free environment. For Detroit workers, the news was devastating. Generations of secure, middle-class jobs vanished overnight. Union leaders condemned GM, pointing to taxpayer bailouts and accusing the company of abandoning its roots. GM's defense was simple economics. U.S. production costs soared, while Canada offered savings and stability. The Canadian Auto Workers Union celebrated, and the government touted their business-friendly policies. In Michigan, the ripple effects were immediate. Suppliers lost orders, local businesses suffered, and communities faced shrinking tax bases. The closure of GM plants marked the unraveling of Detroit's industrial ecosystem. Politicians condemned the move, but rhetoric offered little comfort to thousands facing unemployment. The policy meant to protect American jobs had, ironically, sent them across the border. The contrast was stark optimism in Oshawa, despair in Detroit. GM's departure wasn't just a business decision, it was the start of an economic unraveling. The Motor City's foundation was beginning to crack. The question, who would be next? The answer came quickly. After GM's exit, all eyes turned to Ford. Ford, deeply rooted in American history, faced the same harsh reality. Tariffs were crushing profits. The cost of producing their flagship F-150 soared, threatening jobs and the company's future. Ford's leadership faced a choice: stay loyal to Detroit or protect shareholders. The administration's trade policy showed no signs of changing, making high costs the new normal. Canada, with stable trade agreements and government incentives, became the obvious alternative. Ford announced it would move engine and transmission manufacturing from Michigan to Windsor and Oakville, Ontario. The news devastated Michigan communities. High-skilled, high-paying jobs disappeared and workers faced uncertain futures. Ford's move was strategic. Windsor's proximity to Detroit allowed logistical connections while escaping tariffs. Canada rolled out tax credits, grants, and training funds, contrasting sharply with the U.S. government's adversarial stance. Canadian officials openly recruited companies unsettled by U.S. policies, and Ford was a major win. The message was clear: no company was immune from economic pressures. If GM and Ford could leave, anyone could. The narrative of an American manufacturing renaissance was crumbling. Shuttered plants and anxious workers replaced the promise of revival. Ford's decision signaled a new era, one where even the most American companies looked north for survival. The exodus was accelerating. Detroit's identity was under siege. The Motor City's future was in jeopardy. The dominoes kept falling. Next up, Chrysler. Chrysler, now part of Stellantis, added another blow to Detroit's decline. Once a symbol of resilience, Chrysler found itself squeezed by tariffs and supply chain chaos. The company announced a major investment, not in Michigan but in Ontario, expanding its Windsor plant for electric vehicles. Simultaneously, Chrysler closed several Detroit-area component plants, citing unsustainable costs. The closures devastated local economies and marked the end of an era for iconic facilities. Stellantis justified the move as a way to streamline production and escape U.S. trade volatility. Canada's government offered generous subsidies for EV production, aligning with Stellantis's green ambitions. U.S. tariffs pushed Chrysler to accelerate investment in Canada's growing automotive sector. Workers who had sacrificed for Chrysler now watched as jobs and promises vanished. The "imported from Detroit" slogan rang hollow. In Windsor, the expansion was hailed as a landmark, securing thousands of jobs and positioning Ontario as a leader in automotive technology. Detroit, meanwhile, faced resignation and anger as another pillar of its economy crumbled. The crisis was no longer about one company. It was about the city's survival. Detroit's core identity was slipping away. Even Tesla, the face of American innovation, looked north for stability. Tariffs and trade disputes threatened Tesla's battery supply chain, driving up costs and uncertainty. Quebec, rich in minerals and clean hydroelectric power, offered Tesla a solution. The province courted Tesla with access to resources, cheap energy, and financial incentives. Tesla announced a major partnership in Quebec, building a facility for battery component manufacturing. This move diverted future investment from the U.S. to Canada, securing jobs and technology for Quebec. Tesla's decision was strategic: co-locate battery production with resources and avoid U.S. tariffs. The impact was less about immediate job loss and more about lost opportunities for American industry. Canada was building a critical piece of the EV supply chain. Detroit's hopes of becoming an EV hub faded as Tesla looked elsewhere. The new centers of automotive power were shifting. The tariffs meant to protect American innovation were driving it away. The cracks in the wall were widening. The exodus wasn't limited to legacy giants. Startups like Rivian were also fleeing. Rivian, once a beacon of hope for American manufacturing, was hit hard by tariffs and supply chain disruptions. Lacking the deep pockets of GM or Ford, Rivian faced rising costs and production delays. The company announced it would shift future assembly lines to Canada, citing the need for stability and government support. The Illinois plant would remain, but expansion and new jobs would go north. The decision was a vote of no confidence in the U.S. manufacturing climate. Canada offered Rivian incentives, land, and grants, seeing the startup as key to its sustainable transportation strategy. Rivian's move sent a chilling message to other startups. The risks of U.S. manufacturing were too high. Canada was now the destination for auto tech investment. The problem wasn't just Detroit's past, it was America's future. From GM to Rivian, the logic was the same. Tariffs meant to protect were driving companies away. The American heartland was being hollowed out by domestic policy. The jobs of tomorrow were leaving today. The Motor City's legacy was slipping away. The exodus was nearly complete. Where does this leave Detroit? The factories that once defined American industry now stand empty. The exodus of automakers is not just a loss of jobs, but a loss of identity and future. Canada's auto industry is booming, fueled by stable policies and a focus on electric vehicles. The contrast is stark silent factories in Michigan, bustling sites in Ontario and Quebec. The intended revival of American manufacturing has instead created an economic vacuum. The road ahead for Detroit is uncertain. Can these jobs and investments ever return? For now, I'm Chris Wallace. Thank you for watching.